Today we're going to do a beginner friendly everyday makeup look. Emphasis on the beginner friendly because we are going to get real into details today. So if you don't know how to do your makeup, you want to get better at doing your makeup, anything like that, sit down, listen up, and let's get into it. For reference, I have dry skin, so if you have dry skin, this will work well for you. If you don't have dry skin, you might have to make some tweaks. For dry skin girlies, your most important thing is going to be going in with a moisturizer before you start anything. Right now, I am starting with a completely clean face. I washed my face and I have nothing on it. So before we do anything, we're going to go in with a moisturizer, and I'm going to go in with a pretty good amount. But you want to make sure you find a moisturizer that lays well under makeup, because some moisturizers are more for nighttime, so you want to make sure you get one that goes well under makeup. I am going to do a whole video on beginner friendly makeup products, so stay tuned for that, and I'll kind of go through all of the products that I'm using. But today's all about steps, techniques, placement, that kind of thing. Once you put your moisturizer on, you should have enough where your face is a little shiny. So if your face isn't a little shiny after you put your moisturizer on, put on a little more, okay? Then you're going to want to let it sink in for about 3 minutes. If you go right in on top of this and start putting product on top before your moisturizer sinks in, it's all just going to slide off your face. So you want to make sure you give this about 3 to 5 minutes to fully sink in before you go on to the next product. Once your moisturizer has had a few minutes to sink in, then we're going to go in with a milky toner. Now this is just going to add an extra layer of hydration and make sure your skin is really smooth and silky and ready for foundation. Once again, we're going to go in with a pretty good amount, and we're just going to rub this all over your face. My face is very reflective now, which is how you want it. And now we're going to let this sink in for another couple minutes, and then we'll get into the makeup. Do not skip your skin prep. Your skin prep is very, very important, and that's the 2 steps we just did. Make sure you do that, or your makeup is just going to look dry and cakey on your skin no matter what makeup you use. So these 2 steps are very important, and make sure you do them. While that sinks in, I'm going to go ahead and put on a lip plumper. This step is optional, but I love it. We're going to go ahead and move on to our brows. You want to make sure you get all of the skin prep you just did off your brows, because that will kind of make stuff not stick to your eyebrows. So I just go in with a Q-tip and just kind of wipe over my brows just to make sure there's no moisturizing product in there. Then I like to go in with a brow pencil. My favorite are the ones that have a spoolie on one end and a pencil on the other. But first you're going to go through with the spoolie end and just brush through your brows just to make sure they're all standing up and not facing all sorts of ways. Then you're going to go in with the pencil end, and I like to start with doing just a line under my brow. I just start going in at the bottom of my natural brow and trace along the edge. This kind of gives you more definition and a natural line to follow. I do the same thing on the top of my brow, but I start kind of about 2/3 of the way in because I don't want it all the way up in the front of my brow. So I start tracing right about here. Once you have that, you can just kind of go in and lightly fill it in. So I'm going to go really lightly in the front of my brow and just fill it in a little bit. You're going to brush through it just to make sure it's all blended, and then you're just going to go ahead and shape it how you want. Everyone's brow shape is different, but just go with what looks best for you. I always have one brow that looks better than the other. It never fails. Once you like how they look, you're just going to go in with a clear brow gel. This is just to hold them in place. Just brush through and brush up and then outwards once you get towards the end. And then you can take your wand or your finger, either one, and just make sure it's the shape you want it to be in. And then the same thing on the other side. So you're going to brush upwards and then a little bit more out as you get towards the end. And then using the spoolie or your finger, just go through and make sure it's all shaped correctly. Going back to base makeup, now we're going to go in with the glow serum. Your face should already be pretty glowy just from your skin prep, but this just gives you an extra little bit of glow, which I personally love. You're just going to put some on your fingers and then rub it all over your face. At this step, you're going to look a little bit insane because you're so glowy, but once you put foundation on top, it all comes together, okay? Trust the process. Moving on to foundation, we're going to put some product on the back of our hand, and then you're going to work it into the back of your beauty blender, and then you're going to go onto your face, and you're just going to tap that in. You're going to want to work in light layers. You can always go back in and add a little bit more product, but once it starts getting cakey, you can't really fix that. Once you have a nice even layer, then you can go back in with some extra product just on the areas you have little breakouts or something you want to cover a little bit more. And you can just go back over those areas so you don't have a whole lot of product in the areas you don't need it. You don't want to drag your foundation, you just want to tap it. I like to use the round end of the beauty blender and just slowly tap all over. Now, Moving on to concealer, I recommend having 2 shades of concealer. You want one that's exactly your skin tone and then one that's a little lighter for under your eyes. So first we're going to go in with the concealer that is our skin tone, and we're going to go over any blemishes. We're just going to paint over anywhere we have any breakouts. And then we're going to take the lighter concealer and we're going to go under our eyes. I like to put a decent amount just right here on the inner corner. I like to let my concealer sit and thicken up so it has more coverage. And right on the inner corner of your eye is where you're going to want the most coverage, so I like to apply it there and then we'll blend it out in a minute. So once you have your concealer on, you're going to want to let it sit for like 2 to 3 minutes just to thicken up and get as much coverage out of it as you can. Once you've let it sit for a minute, I like to go back in with the same end of the beauty blender that I used for my foundation to tap in the concealer, because that way even if your concealer is a little bit off from the shade of your foundation, it mixes with the foundation that your sponge soaked up and it kind of makes sure everything is a consistent color. So whereas my concealer is a little bit light, once I go over it with the beauty blender that has a little bit of my foundation left on it, you can't even tell. For your concealer, you want to tap very lightly because you don't want to take away the coverage. You just want to blend out the edges. So we're just going to tap over it very lightly, and that's it. Now, for under the eyes, I like to use the other end of the beauty blender because I do want to keep the brightness under the eyes. We're going to start with tapping right here where we applied it and just slowly bring it out. We're basically just going to keep most of the product here and just slowly bring it out this way and down a little bit so it's all blended in and looks seamless. I also like to bring my concealer up on my eyelid just to prep for any eyeshadow we want to do. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side, slowly tapping in right where we applied the product, and then we're just going to bring it out to the side, down the side of our nose, and then we're going to bring any extra product up on our same thing. We're focusing the majority of the product right on our inner corner and just blending out the rest of it so it blends in with the foundation. Now that we have a solid base going on, all our blemishes are covered, under eyes are covered, everything's pretty covered, but we're now kind of like one dimension. We don't have much shape in our face, so it's time to bring that back. So we're going to go in with a contour stick. Now there is a difference between contour and bronzer. Contour's got a more gray undertone, so it gives you more of a shadow. Bronzer has more of a warmer undertone, so it just gives you more of that like bronzy look. I like to go for one that's in between. So for my cream contour or bronzer, it's a little more cool toned, and then when we move to powder bronzer, it'll be a little more warm toned. So you can kind of decide what you want to do there depending on your face shape. You want to go right where your cheekbone is. So you're going to do a little line right here where your cheekbone is. I like to do a little bit on my forehead and a little bit on the outer corner of my jawline. This is the placement I do, is jawline, cheekbone, and a little bit on your forehead. If you want to, you can do a little bit of nose contour, but for me, that was the hardest part. So really all I do is one line on each side of my nose and one line at the end. And then I like to use a brush to blend this in. So you want to take this brush, is kind of like at an angle and it's very dense. You don't want a super loose brush or it'll just blend it all over your face. You kind of want to keep the product where you put it. So I like to take this brush and just tap. You don't, once again, you don't want to drag. You just want to tap right over where you put that product and just blend it in a little. So we're just going to slowly start tapping right where we put that product. You don't want to go in a big area or anything. I'm just tapping back and forth on that line until it's blended in, just like that. Same thing everywhere else we put that bronzer. Alright, once that's all blended in, we're going to go in with a little bit of blush. Now, if you're anything like me, when I first started makeup, I thought adding blush was wrong because I was putting foundation on to take the redness out of my face. Why would I put redness back on it? But blush is actually very important. It makes your makeup look more natural. You just are putting the blushiness back where you want it. So for me, I like to keep it pretty high up on my cheeks. So I go right here above where we put that bronzer contour, but just a little bit closer to my temples. This I also like to blend in with a brush, but this brush is a little bit less dense, so it's a little bit fluffier. And I'm just going to slowly start tapping right where we put that blush. It's okay if it looks a little crazy at first, so while you're blending it in, it might look a little crazy. If it does, grab your beauty blender and go back in with the side you used to blend your concealer in and just tap over those edges and it will help it blend in a little bit more. And then what I like to do is take whatever's left on my brush and just tap it right on my nose. It helps kind of blend in that contour and bronzer you put on your nose, but also just makes your blush look more natural on your face. Once you're happy with how this looks, now it's time to move into powder. I like to use a loose powder, but before you go in with any powder, you want to make sure you are really well blended under your eyes. There's no creasing or any caking or anything, so you just want to go back in with your beauty blender and just tap over under your eyes. I like to go in with a little brush for powder, so you're going to want to tap into your powder and then tap off all the excess. You don't want much powder on your brush, you just want enough to set it. So you tap into your powder and then tap off all the excess. Make sure there's no creasing. And then you just go tap in right under your eye. And you can see the difference. This side is just much shinier and looks like it's going to slip off of my face, whereas this side looks more matte and like it's going to stay. Same thing for your eyelids. Make sure you tap out all the lines and creases, tap into your powder, tap off all the excess, and then just set it. Now, I like to use this little brush for around my nose and under my eyes. And then for the rest of my face where I don't need to be as precise, I like to go in with a bigger fluffy brush. Just tap into the powder, tap off the excess, and set my face. This is just going to kind of set your makeup in place. Now, you can stop here with your powder products and it will look beautiful, but I like to go in with a powder version of my bronzer and a powder version of my blush on top of where I put the cream versions because it makes them a little bit more long lasting. So we're going to go in with a powder bronzer, and like I said, this one is a little bit more warm toned versus the bronzer stick I used. So we're going to go in with this on a very, very fluffy brush, and we're just going to lightly tap over everywhere we put that cream bronzer. While I'm doing bronzer, I like to take some bronzer on a very fluffy eyeshadow brush and just run this through my crease on my eyelid just to give a little bit of dimension. Kind of see the difference. It just makes it look a little bit more put together. Same thing with powder blush. We're just going to tap in it lightly with a little bit of a fluffy brush and go right over where we put that cream blush. Very lightly. We're just using this to reinforce the product that we put on and just make sure it's more long lasting and it stays all day. That is our base pretty much done. Now you want to look at it and make sure you don't want to add anything. Do you need a little bit more blush? Do you need a little bit more bronzer? To me, I think this looks really good. So now we're going to go ahead and set it in place. I like to go in with two different setting sprays. Your first one is more of, it's just kind of going to take the powder products and make them a little bit more smooth, a little less powdery, and just make them look more skin-like. So that's what we're going to go in with first. And we're just going to spray this all over our face. Don't be shy, okay? You need a good bit. Okay, that's our first setting spray, so we're just gonna let that dry. You can kind of see it just makes your makeup look less powdery and a little bit more skin-like. This step is optional, but I'm gonna go in with more of an aerosol setting spray, and this is just gonna lock your makeup in and make it stay all day. So this isn't necessary if you're just like going to school or something, but if you're gonna be like outside or sweating or something, this is gonna be very helpful. Okay, that is our base makeup done. Now we're going to go ahead and wipe off that lip plumper if you decided to use it. We're going to go ahead and do a lip liner stain. I know when I first started wearing makeup, I hated how I looked with lipstick or lip gloss or anything like that because it felt too bold. A lip liner stain, this one is very close to my natural color. It gives you a little bit of color, but you can just throw a clear lip balm on top of it and it looks natural, but it still looks pretty. I like to cover that outer like 2/3 with the lip liner stain, and then we're gonna let that sit and dry while we do our eyes. For eyes, this is optional, but I think it makes the biggest difference. This is tight lining, so it's taking a black pencil eyeliner and running it across your upper lash line. This just gives you a whole lot more definition around your eyes. Then you want to curl your eyelashes, which if this part intimidates you, don't do it, but once again, it does make a big difference. And now it's time to put on mascara. We're almost done. Everybody puts their mascara on differently. I find it easiest to kind of blink my mascara on, but you'll figure out what's easiest for you. If you get mascara on your eyelids, or if you accidentally bump your nose or anything, let me just tell you, I've done it a million times. Don't worry about it. I'm going to show you how to clean it up because you can see I got a little bit of mascara up here on my eyelid. If that happens, don't worry about it. Just let it dry, and we're going to go back in with the spoolie end of our eyebrow pen and just lightly scrape over it and it'll come right off. Now that that's done, check and see if your lip stain is dry, and if it is time to take it off. You know what I mean? It just adds a little bit of color to your lips without feeling super bold. So now we're just going to go in with a clear lip balm on top, and there you have it. That is your beginner friendly everyday makeup that's going to last all day. Alright, I hope that helped. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have a specific event you want me to do a how to do your makeup for, please let me know. I would love to do that. But that is it for today. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!